Page 20. Question 15 continued. The action gets quickened tempo by the gathering conflict till Gaveston is forced to leave the country. Till Gaveston is forced to leave the country. The appearance of the Queen and her pleadings with the barons resolves the first crisis, but suggests another deeper gravity. Brisk dialogue keeps pace with the rapid movement of action. Stage action, at the same time, reinforces the dialogues. As for example, in the scene where the nobles heckle the king after Gaveston's recall. The murder of Gaveston is the culminating point of this conflict. There is a temporary relief in the conflict when at Boroughbridge the king is victorious over his nobles and Lancaster and Warwick meet their doom. The dramatic crisis is suggested in the escape of Mortimer from the Tower. The fourth act shows the crisis in the dramatic plot with the landing of Isabella and Mortimer in England. This is the climax of the plot structure. The capture of Edward evinces the falling action or resolution. In the last act, there is the catastrophe ending in the murder of the king, followed by Mortimer's sad end. Marlowe enlivens the interest in the plot by frequent shifting of scenes, giving thus the impression of progressive stage action. Edward II gains remarkable dynamism in its action and characterization, a fact which invites comparison with his previous dramas, where there are static presentations of the poetic effusions of the heroes. Marlowe proves his dramatic genius in the handling of historical materials. Here he achieves a happy blend of the chronicle play and a moving tragedy. On the whole, he is faithful to history, but he takes bold liberties with history with a view to making the action continuous and dramatic. He also motivates some of the incidents, for example, by making the king heap honours on the old Spencer and, in his natural anger, taking the young Spencer at once into Gaveston's place. Marlowe, though playing fast and loose with historical times, motivates the prompt transfer of the hatred of the barons from Gaveston to Spencer. In characterization also, this play shows distribution of sympathy over a diversified cast. Gaveston, Mortimer, Isabella bear marks of genius. Even the barons are contrasted and individualized. Yet, in spite of the manifest marks of dramatic genius in Edward II, the play cannot be called a good drama. There are serious gaps in the structural presentation of the incidents. There are disgusting repetitions of almost the same kind of action. The struggle between the weak but self-important foolish king and his obstinate barons. The scenes do not hold together to ensure a smooth progression of the plot. There are abrupt changes in the character of Mortimer, Isabella, and Edward himself. The dramatic development of characters in clash with circumstances is nowhere seen. Edward, though he moves us to pity and terror, is not a tragic hero in the Aristotelian sense of the term. He does not suffer any internal conflict, and his incompetence and foolishness in the earlier scenes forfeit our sympathy for him. Marlowe is essentially a poet. In his earlier plays, notably his Tamburlaine and Dr. Faustus, are poetic idealization of characters. The heroes are conceived on a superhuman scale, and their characters are shown through magnificent poetic effusions. are shown through magnificent poetic effusions. Saintsbury remarks, open quotes, Marlowe was one of the greatest poets of the world, whose work was cast by accident into an imperfect mould of the drama. Close quotes. Edward II is full of glorious poetry. The declamations here are shorter, and the dialogue is distributed in speeches. Moreover, poetry is less exuberant and more suited to dramatic expression by the characters in their different circumstances. Page 21. The King is an admirable poet, full of the most delicate fancy. Gaveston and Mortimer possess poetic temperaments. The poetic utterances of the King in the Berkeley Castle and Kenilworth Castle move pity and terror to a considerable extent. Let us cite some examples to substantiate our theses. Gaveston's romantic imagination conjures up a vision of pastimes and amusement. Quoting from the play, Act 1, Scene 1, lines 56 to 65. And in the day, when we shall walk abroad, like sylvan nymphs my pages shall be clad, my men like satyrs grazing on the lawns shall with their goat feet dance an antic hay. Sometimes a lovely boy in Diana's shape shall bathe him in a spring. In its Renaissance sensuousness and classical allusions, the passage has a romantic effect. The King's passionate outburst at the banishment of his favourite has a poetic exuberance. Quoting from the play, my heart is as an anvil unto sorrow, which beats upon it like the Cyclops' hammers. Ah, had some bloodless fury rose from hell, and with my kingly sceptre struck me dead, when I was forced to leave my Gaveston. Act 1, Scene 4, lines 312 to 317. In the Abbey of Neath, the King submits himself in pathetic poetry. Good father, on the lap lay I this head, laden with mickle care. Oh, might I never open these eyes again, never again lift up this drooping head. Oh, never more lift up this dying heart. Act 4, Scene 6, lines 39 to 43. In Kenilworth Castle, in reply to the comforting words of Leicester, the wretched king bursts into a poetry of deep pathos. The griefs of private men are soon allayed, but not of kings. The forest deer, being struck, runs to an herb that closeth up the wounds. But when the imperial lion's flesh is gored, he rends and tears it with his wrathful paw. Once again, the griefs of private men are soon allayed, but not of kings. The forest deer, being struck, runs to an herb that closeth up the wounds. But when the imperial lion's flesh is gored, he rends and tears it with his wrathful paw. Act 5, Scene 1, lines 8 to 12. The scene in Kenilworth Castle in which the king is forced to give up the crown rings with the poetry of despairing self-pity. To the question whether he will give up the crown, he appeals to time and the sun to stand still, and his prayers show his felicitous flight of fancy. Quoting, continue ever, thou celestial sun, let never silent night possess this clime. Stand still, you watchers of the element, All times and seasons rest you at a stay, that Edward may be still fair England's king. Act 5, Scene 1, lines 64 to 68. Mortimer is also a poet. His defiance of the king's order of dispatching him to the Tower is couched with the force and violence of poetry. Can ragged stony walls immure thy virtue that aspires to heaven? Act 3, Scene 3, lines 71 to 72. Page 22. Mortimer's last speech on base fortune and his farewell to Isabella vibrate with poetic passion. Farewell, fair queen, weep not for Mortimer's that scorns the world, and as a traveller goes to discover countries yet unknown. Act 5, Scene 6, lines 64 to 66. It is indeed the magnificence and pathos of poetry that make an intense impact on the readers. Question 16. Marlowe was great as a dramatist, but as a poet he was still greater. Even in tragedies, it is the poet rather than the playwright who commands our admiration. Close quotes. Discuss with reference to Edward II. Answer. See answer to question 14. Question 17. What merits and what defects do you discover in Marlowe's Edward II? A. As a study of human character. B. As a historical play. C. As an acting play. Answer. A. Marlowe's Edward II indicates an advance on his earlier works in respect of characterization. In his play, progress in character study is evinced over a numerous and diversified cast. Marlowe's previous dramas, notably Tamburlaine and Dr. Faustus, are dominated by the commanding figures of their heroes. They dwarf by contrast the subsidiary characters. Marlowe's achievement in these plays is to give expression to the aspirations and agonies, dreams and defiances of his heroes. They are static characters. They do not grow and develop in clash with circumstances. There is hardly anything like the study of character. He does not explore the intricacies and depths of characters. His plays only offer glimpses of the ambitions and aspirations of the heroes for power and wealth, for infinite knowledge, power and riches. The pictures are highly exaggerated as the characters are conceived on a superhuman scale. They are hardly true to human life. In Edward II, there is an attempt at the study of human characters. Edward, Gaveston, Mortimer and Isabella are depicted in depth to some extent. Edward is a complex character, a mixture of unlovable qualities of a degenerate and of admirable qualities of dignity, gentleness and courtesy. He is impetuous, incompetent and helpless at the beginning, but towards the end he takes on dignity as he is humiliated and tortured. Mortimer and Isabella also undergo changes towards the end of the drama. But these changes are abrupt and sudden. Isabella's change from a devoted wife to a paramour of Mortimer is not sufficiently accounted for. So also Mortimer's change into a Machiavellian villain. However, the characters are individualized in Edward II. Mortimer's aggressive arrogance, Lancaster's vanity, Warwick's unscrupulousness, Pembroke's intelligence are indicated. Kent's character is shown in the round. Loyal to his brother, he protests against the extravagant titles loaded on Gaveston, but is shocked when kinship is affronted. His desertion to the barons is compelled by the weight of their evidence against Edward. At the last, he is a solitary figure. He joins the rebels through a mistaken sense of duty to the state. His heart and orthodox conscience belong with the king. Gaveston, with his easy, light-hearted and intriguing nature, is impressive. Thus Marlowe evinces his skill both in the variety and subtlety of portrayals, though there are serious drawbacks in these portraitures, particularly in the case of Edward, Mortimer and Isabella. B. As a historical play, Edward II has considerable merit. It is history well presented, history well dramatized. He condenses and omits and rearranges the materials of history in a bold and free manner so as to make the action continuous and dramatic. Page 23. Edward's reign has been skillfully compressed by an artistic union of the stories of Gaveston and Spencer, and by condensing the principal movements of the baronical war into a single victory gained by the king over the combined forces. He has motivated some incidents. He has disciplined the chronicle play to tragedy. But it has certain defects. Marlowe has left many gaps which hinder the smooth progression of the plot of the drama. For example, we are not told why the Bishop of Coventry is spoken of as the only cause of Gaveston's banishment by Edward. The incidents at places are managed crudely. Technically, its most conspicuous weakness is a break in the middle with a too abrupt shift in sympathies. Then again, the gains in dramatic skill are offset by a loss in poetic intensity. The sense of terror and wonder evoked by the intense poetic fervour of Dr. Faustus and Tamburlaine is absent here. But on the whole, Marlowe has presented history in a dramatic structure. He has given the spirit of history, the turbulence of the nobles, the factions, the constant hostility of the neighbouring kingdoms of Scotland, Ireland and France, and the defeat and death of the king. C. As an acting play, Edward II shows certain advantages over the chronicle plays of the age and also over Marlowe's previous dramas. Marlowe's previous plays, like Tamburlaine and Dr. Faustus, are a series of loose, unconnected incidents strung together. They are without structure. But in Edward II, the striking emphasis on stage action shows that the practicing playwright has superseded the poet in Marlowe. An acting play is primarily a play of action and dialogue. It seeks to illuminate characters by contrast and trace the development of characters through situation and internal conflict. Marlowe's Edward II is not a successful stage play in this sense. There are too many gaps in the progression of the plot. There are tiring repetitions of the quarrels between the kings and the barons. Scenes are shifted with no great care about their interactions. The dungeon scene and the prolonged death scene are too spectacular and heartless to be up to the cultured taste of the refined part of the audience. When the play was revived in 1903 by the Elizabethan Stage Society, it was found necessary to cut much of the Queen's part to shape her to consistency. If some of the scenes of conflict between the king and his parents, which are too much alike, are cut down, the rapid sequence in which the historical events are rearranged and the brisk dialogues very often leading to climaxes, make the drama not an unsuitable stage play. Question 18. Examine Marlowe's art of characterization with suitable references. Answer. Marlowe is not adept in the art of characterization. His characters are superhuman figures typifying some grand passions. Tamburlaine typifies the lust for power, Dr. Faustus the passion for sovereign knowledge, Barabbas greed, etc. They speak high-flown poetry and enact their roles with the exhibition of magnificent passions and emotions. So they do not impress us as complex characters with multitudinous feelings and numerous traits. They do not change or develop. In spite of their grand passions, they remain static and straight characters. Moreover, his plays are one-man shows. He displays only one character and cannot distribute sympathies over a diversified cast. His female characters are flat and frigid. Add answer to question 17a.